We're now going to talk about the cloud. This is a slightly self-indulgent session. I'm going to tell you why. I've spent the last 12 months dealing with layers of BS when it comes to cloud. In my role as a journalist, I go around trade shows and I read press releases and marketing documents and talk to people, and the confusion that I feel is vast, and I felt it would be useful for us as an organisation to hopefully dispel some myths when it comes to the cloud. To help me do that hopefully when they're sat in the right order, they are fantastic, from left to right. Matt Samuel, who is Formula E post-production manager. Jonathan Smith, Net Insights Solution Area Expert Cloud. Lachlan Smith, no relation, EMG Gravity Cloud Production Developer. And last but not least, Mike Lethem, Sky Sports Software Operations Manager. Thank you all for joining me today. Before we dispel some myths, I'd like each of you very succinctly, starting with Matt, to tell us where you are as far as the cloud is concerned, you and your organisation are concerned. And while you do that, I'm going to get the clicker, which I left on the podium. Go.
We at Formula E are entirely remote production, all run through the cloud, and all of our post-production and production needs are also done in that way using a cloud-native MAM system, and everything we have access to is all from the cloud.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Net Insight have a product portfolio that spans everywhere from cloud-based software architectures all the way down to on-premise hardware. So we're kind of the panacea of everything you might call cloud.
Excellent. Lachlan.
At EMG, we've done a lot of POCs with cloud. We've done a lot of testing. We also work alongside companies such as TNT Sports, doing a lot of their cloud broadcasts. We have a small little facility which we sort of also run, and depending on how you want to define cloud, which I know we're going to get into, it is cloud.
Excellent. And Mike?
We've been doing sort of software production, cloud production for about 4 years now. Started off with a lot of light touch, but have sort of scaled that up into full remote production.
Thank you very much. Right, that's where we are. So we have a broadcaster, we have a facilities stroke production, we have a vendor, and we have a federation, right? So we have a nice gamut of opinions. We're going to go through some myths one by one. We're going to start with a very easy one, and this is genuine. The cloud is in the sky. Lachlan, I think you're best placed to answer this.
Yeah, I have had multiple discussions, people thinking that the cloud is somewhere up in the satellites because of purely based on the name. It's not. If you're talking about public cloud, it's a warehouse somewhere with a lot of compute, with air conditioning. Exactly the same as a server farm in a building, computers, servers in a rack with air conditioning.
Thank you very much. The cloud will save you money. Go for it, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm dying to answer this one. So it's a typically kind of throwaway comment, right? Because cloud can mean different things in different circumstances, and I think the one thing that's really important is understanding the correct architecture for your business and your needs. And so just saying cloud will save you money is complete nonsense. The right architecture will save you money if that uses components that follow a cloud-based architecture and methodology, then so be it, good news, but that's definitely not always the case.
Mike, you're nodding knowingly.
It depends on what you're doing with the cloud, right? You can do something very small that might save you some money, but you could equally do something large scale that's going to cost you a lot more.
Thank you very much. Matt, anything you want to add before we move on to the next one?
So we run, I think it's 11 events a year. And when you're only actually using your sort of production and doing that for 3 days a year, you're only using what you're using in the cloud for those 3 days. For the main part, you can scale up and scale down your virtual machines that you're using. The one thing that you'll spend money on the whole time would be your cloud storage. Other than that, there is a very easy way of managing that and sort of comparing and going for the cost-effective way of working as a whole.
Thanks very much. The cloud reduces your carbon footprint. I'm really interested in this because I don't know what the power output is from the servers that we're using in the sky, well, in the cloud. Guys, what do we think? Lachlan, Jonathan, you're nodding.
Yeah, I think, again, it's a very difficult thing to measure. First of all, there's a lot of information that will come from the public cloud providers around sustainability and so on. But again, that's not normalized in any way. But the one thing as a vendor we know is there are certain workloads that are far more efficient to be done on a lump of hardware. from a total power consumption point of view. If you're doing uncompressed or lightly compressed, very high bandwidths, then the most efficient place you can do that is in some bespoke hardware using, not using COTS compute to do that. And we know that from a direct comparison. Yet, if you are looking to reach into new markets off network, for instance, and you need to use a point of presence to get to that market that you don't currently have, then it's going to be far more efficient and far more sustainable for you to use some kind of service to achieve that than ramping up an entire facility to do that. So again, context is really important when throwing away, single line answers.
So, Matt, from Formula E, sustainability is in your DNA, to quote SailGP earlier. Does the cloud help you or not with that process?
Yes, Formula E is net zero carbon since inception, and it's a very important thing for us to make sure we're doing whatever we can to be sustainable. I think the one thing that you need to consider with this is by switching to remote production, we're not flying anybody across the world. There's a number of people that aren't going to the event, that they can just come to our remote production facility in London and do that event that way, and potentially balancing out what you might be using on the servers, and that way you're actually potentially saving by not flying everyone around the world and doing a lot more sustainable production as a whole.
Lachlan, how easy is it to get the data from the cloud providers about their green credentials?
I mean, it's not always the easiest. It's hard to, without monitoring any of that information directly as you're using it as well, it's hard to equate to exactly what your usage of any carbon emissions are from public cloud. On the flip side, I know that my servers, which get switched off when they're not in use, I know that they're not producing any carbon emissions during that time. So there's a lot of arguments back and forth for each side, really.
Yeah. Mike, Sky's a big sustainability drive. Is using the cloud or software-based production helping with this?
Yeah, I think it is. I think we can condense a lot of our workflows into like a tighter box to say we went through a process a couple of years ago where we took out the hardware to run I think 9 channels, which was 12 bays of equipment. We got rid of all of those. We've condensed that down to a couple of half bays on-prem and some EC2s that are nowhere near equating anywhere to the 12 bays of 24/7 running equipment.
Excellent. Let's move on to the next one. There's virtually no limit to the processing power or speed. Jonathan, you laughed. Why?
Well, because clearly there is a limit to processing power and speed. Again,
I took this directly from a press release, by the way.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's marketing.
Not yours. Not Net Insights, I'd like to point out.
I mean, again, we have to dig under the surface here. Consuming a cloud gives you more availability on demand to services, and maybe that gives you more availability for processing power and speed that you didn't have available locally to you. But it's not magic. I mean, we should be honest about that. Physics is still at play somewhere.
That's my favourite quote of the day. It's not magic.
I think
Mike, go on.
We're also, I think probably quite a lot of us in this room are fighting for the same resource, right? We're looking for cloud compute for broadcasting, but so is Gen AI, right? So we're all fighting for the same thing. So it's not unlimited.
No, absolutely. Right. Latency is a problem for production teams. Lachlan, I think you had a good point, good reaction to this when I mentioned this on our briefing call.
I mean, it's yes and no. So in the stuff which I've been doing, I've done good over 300, nearly 400 games produced via bonded cellular. That inherently has latency in it. And is it a problem? Yes and no. You just change your workflow and how you're directing them. If you're talking to a commentator, you might cue them 1 second earlier if you're on 1 second latency. It's more about being flexible and working alongside it. And really, there's things which you can do to help that. We did, back in 2019, transatlantic broadcast of a rugby league game. That was through all of the highest speed network as you can possibly get. We were still at about half a second latency. What did we do? We killed the cue lights because the cameramen weren't moving when they still had a red light on, even though we were off of them. It's very easy to adapt for those sort of workflows. So as long as all the feeds are hitting you in the production facility at the same time, everything's in sync, there's really no difference to being on site and everything being completely real time. versus it being remote, 2-second latency. I've done broadcasts at 10 seconds latency. It's no difference.
Mike?
I'm going to contradict you
Yeah,
slightly
that's
there.
fine.
That actually queue lights are the important thing to me. You know, in latency, getting signals in, you're 100% right. Get those things in and in sync and in time with each other. Once we know what that latency is, we can work around that. But actually, having super fast sort of comms and tallies back to site is really important for our camera operators. And that's the bit that we've kind of had to make sure is really quick.
See, I think it is important, especially comms. Comms, yes, 100%. Comms is a big one. But I think it very much depends on what the sport is as well, which you're following with the queue lights. And if camera operators have been trained and used to doing that, it's very easy to just get them, listen to the director. They'll let you know sooner than if you're holding on a shot and then they need to get off to something, but they're late and they're already missing something, which they need to whip away to.
Matt, what's your experience?
We haven't really had many problems with it. I think we had the whole setup and it's worked well for us. I think as we sort of said, once that hits you and where you're doing the broadcast from, you are watching what you're watching that's going out there. And I think in general, here and there, something might be affected by that, but it's very rarely that it properly affects anything that we're really doing.
Thank you very much. You can only do live cloud production with dark fiber. That was taken from a thought leadership piece from a respected technology magazine in the US. Do you need dark fiber, Matt, to do Formula E?
We do not, no.
Shall we move on? Does anybody got an opinion on dark fiber?
So sort of answers the question.
I'll go another one. Everything has to be done on the public cloud, and something else that I took directly from an article. Jonathan? Give me your views on public cloud here.
Yeah, exactly. Public cloud's just another tool in the arsenal. It's somewhere you can consume services or somewhere you can consume compute to get the job done. But is it always the absolute answer to every workload? No, it's definitely not. We see different customers and even different customers dealing with different content. You know, the blend of your production needs for latency, for bandwidth, for quality, for accessibility to your consumer, all plays into what you're going to use to get that done. So we're back to good old-fashioned systems design engineering and working out exactly what the right tools are for the job. And public cloud can play a really important part in a lot of cases, but everything does not have to be done on the public cloud. There's lots of other ways to get stuff done.
Anybody else want to add anything before we move on public cloud? Okay, so this is one of my favourites. You can just spin up and spin down cloud services. Is that true or is that false?
I mean, it's both true and false.
Two things can be true at the same time.
It's one of those ones. Yes, you can start instances. You can take them down. Some of the best practices are to just destroy your instances and rebuild them from scratch each time. It depends on what service you've got. Sometimes your licenses in the cloud are tied to hardware IDs. That means you can't destroy them. That means if you've only got 3 shows a year going off of them and you're having to keep these instances there, it's constantly costing you money. It very much depends on your use factor, I'd say.
Matt, do you spin things up and spin them down?
Yes, it's fun at the same time. I'd say, like for example, our virtual machines that we do all of our cloud rendering through, we've had some problems with, and before realizing I need to shut them down and build new ones, which Adobe licenses are on which computer. If I was going to click, you log into Adobe, it says, which one do you want to kick off? You don't know. You just got to guess and hope that nobody notices. I have learned how to do that accidentally by breaking quite a few. But as I said earlier, I think the one thing that you can't spin up and spin down is the storage costs. The storage costs will always be there. The more you do in the cloud, that will always be there. But you can tactically and more effectively and efficiently manage that system. It's like we have, for race week, we'll put more VMs up so that people have more to go through. They can get the content out quicker. For non-race weeks, we don't need those. They're sitting there, and all you're really paying for is the drives that you've got on the EC2 or as we have Google, we have the compute engines, but it's easy enough to do, and it's just not everything.
Mike?
Yeah, I think it's a comment that will make people think like, oh right, it means you can turn your production on really quickly. Actually, it depends on the complexity of your production and what you're doing. Yes, you can spin things up and spin things down, but what are you doing with it? That's the bit that takes time still.
Yeah, so we turn them on and at the start of the race weekend and turn them off at the end of the race weekend. The idea of going, we have a session starting in 10 minutes, let's spin up all of our VMs, probably not the best of ideas.
Everyone wants to move to a software as a service OpEx model. Therefore, we should all adopt the cloud. Go on, Net Insight.
Yeah, that's a good question. So certainly customers are demanding more flexible commercial models, and I think as vendors we have to be able to offer that. And a lot of that is depending on the business case that's driving that. Of course, if you're looking to target a new monetization opportunity in an emerging market, for instance, you may well want an OpEx model that you can experiment with. But at the same time, there's still sensible business cases being made for non-OpEx models, because if you're looking after a distribution for a channel that's well bedded in and expected to be around for a long time, then you're going to get better business efficiency by making some kind of an investment case in that scenario. So it's not all OpEx and SaaS everywhere. SaaS comes with some pitfalls as well, in that you lose control over that service. So if you can consume that SaaS and you can use that and it does everything you need to do, and you've got no extensibility concerns in the future, then maybe that's going to work for you. But if there is something else that might go on and change in your future, then you have to be a little bit careful.
Mike, from a Sky's point of view, are you paying everything on subscription? Ironically,
and I think SaaS gives you flexibility, pay as you go, subscription, perpetual licensing, all of those things. And I think, you have to evaluate what you're doing with the service and what is the need. We can make anything fit any model that we need to. And that's a big part of my job, is to look at those efficiencies.
The cloud is only good for shoulder programming and social media content. Formula E would suggest otherwise, Matt.
Yeah, we do everything through the cloud. Whether you're getting your live race feed, whether you're getting our video news recordings or director's reels, anything you're getting, you get it from the same place. And I think in this way it's easy, and I think in a way to be able to make the social media content in this way, but the overall positives and ease of using the cloud, there's a lot more to it, and there's a lot more that I think is a lot less for people to worry about at the end point. The people actually using that footage, they're not going to be questioning where they're getting it from. They just need to know that when they click this button, it will be there, and it's making that as easy as possible.
Mike, you've just done some rugby league, I think.
Yeah, and that's it. My point for that is that, we've just finished producing, 20 matches this season of rugby league that was a remote production in cloud, and so I would argue that that's a complete myth.
Lachlan, any points of view from the EMG Gravity end when it comes to just using it for shoulder and or social media content?
Well, in the end of the day, you're often using the same tools in the cloud as you would on site or on a box. What's the difference of where the compute is happening, whether it's on a box on site or if it's up in the cloud somewhere? You're still using the same tools, you're still getting the same output, so therefore it's sort of null and void, really.
This next one's really important. It's only good for lower tier sports. I hear this all the time. It was mentioned at SBS in Amsterdam. Is that true now, but is it going to be true in 18 months, 2 years' time, Jonathan?
Yeah, no, we see what's obviously we know what's carried on our networks, and our networks span from traditional on-premise, IP switches all the way through to cloud-based solutions, and we know what we're carrying using our kit, and it's everything from tier 1 sports all across the panacea, and that can be cloud, it can be on-prem, but cloud is definitely carrying tier 1 sports properties. We know that, so it's fact that it's not just for lower tier sports.
Yeah, Mike, Sky.
Yeah, I think it's around the kind of people's sort of cautiousness around it at the moment, and that's why it's not a tier 1. As I say, people think it's not for tier 1. It's just because as an industry we tend to go quite guarded into these things, and that's the only thing stopping you. There's no reason why it couldn't be for a tier 1 sport.
I think we proved that quite well. Formula E answers that question quite simply. Yeah.
I'm going to skip one because the next bit relates to this. So a major production company said to me, somebody who works for them, says the potential risk to the reputation is too big for a Federation broadcaster to take. But you're saying that's not true.
Well, no, you can have a truck on site and then the generator kills itself, or the mixer panel just stops working. There's no real difference in terms of a potential risk between that and then the cloud, as long as everything's engineered correctly and is there working as it should, as you'd expect it to. What's the difference?
Would Sky put the Premier League on through the cloud, Mike, do you think? It's possibly a harsh question to ask you, but you see where I'm going.
I'm not going to answer that one. but what I would say
you see my point, though?
Yeah, but what I would say is that, as broadcasters and in working in the technology, we always have redundancies. We always look at our redundancy models. We spend a lot of time and money investing in redundancy. That actually, how often are we using them? Maybe once, twice. In a couple of months. We hardly ever go to our redundancy systems, but we pay for them. So, I think there's risk, but there's risk in absolutely everything that we do, but we try and mitigate that.
And you can build the same redundancy into your cloud setup.
Yeah, complete. You can go like a complete one-to-one redundancy. You can do an N+1. Whatever your budget allows you to do for that sport and how important that sport is to you, you can then associate the right redundancy to that.
I think that's a brilliant point, because there's enough flexibility within cloud-based architectures to allow you to make the choice on a production by production basis about what architecture, and you can definitely architecture the cloud to be resilient enough. And I think I joked when we had a little pre-meet to say I think there's more risk to your reputation if you don't consider it, because we're under pressure for margins, and we're under pressure for making these commercial models work. If there is a good fit with this architecture and that business model, then I'd say your reputation is in more danger by not looking at it.
Yeah, there's definitely some productions that we've gone, a complete redundant model, but then there's others where we've said like, no, actually, we can put a smaller light touch production system around that will still get the content to the customer, right?
Matt, why is Formula E so confident in the cloud, do you think?
I was about to say because of me.
Thank you, good night.
I thought I answered all the questions really well. No, I think we've moved this way, and we are such an innovative and engaging sport that we need to be coming up with ideas of making things as good as possible. That we can come here and talk about this and say, look, this is great with the way that we're doing it. And I think that follows our ethos in general. Is yes, sustainability is quite a big thing, but also we want to be able to say we're at the forefront of everything that we do. And moving it this way, and I say we take about 210 feeds in total back from site, and we get our onboard straight to Gravity and Westworks, and an editor can pull everything they need. And nothing has ever gone so badly wrong, because there are things in place to say if this doesn't work, how are we getting it there? We run on-site, we run something called Track Cut, which is just an on-site gallery that it is, if something goes wrong with our broadcast that gets there, there's still something going out with every single track camera that can go out as a fail-safe, which has never had to been used, because it's quite boring to watch, but there's always something that's there going, this is how we will make sure this if something does happen, this is the backup. And fortunately, nothing has happened that way, so that's why we're extremely confident in it in general.
This last one was touched on in the last panel, but it's still relevant. Experienced technical teams are resistant, and the resistant in this case to change. Is that true? And if so, is it holding us back?
I think from a vendor perspective, we see a panacea of different kind of competencies within organisations, and the answer to this question varies tremendously. But is there resistance in traditional broadcast technical teams? Yes, there definitely is. And that can take a long time to unpick and to solve. A lot of my work with customers is about evangelizing some of the benefits of these approaches and these architectures. Yet, if we go and talk to Formula E, of course, you're completely confident with this, and we're having a different conversation. And so it varies wildly. But we have to help influence these teams to change, because that's the one thing that's been consistent through these panels is change is needed, and we have to help those teams through that.
Excellent. Mike, you've got a very big team at Sky. Well, even not your team's big. The Sky is big. Presumably, the levels of expertise and knowledge are going to vary dramatically. So, I'm not expecting a black and white answer to this. But from your point of view, how do you see that change for your experienced technical types?
Yeah, look, you're not going to get a black and white answer from me, but I think the technical teams are not resistant to it. Actually, there's a hunger. There's a people want to learn this. They want to move that way. Actually, it's a steep learning curve, though. It completely breaks down, kind of some of the traditions that we know around broadcast. So, they have to kind of reskill and relearn, and that's the challenge. That's the hard bit. It's not that the individuals themselves are resistant. Everybody is open to it. It's just there's a massive education that's needed.
Go on, Lachlan.
I was just going to say, I feel like there's also education needed, and I think you might find it on the production side as well, education. But just because it's cloud doesn't mean it's something scary, something new, something that isn't going to fall over. It's still the same stuff you're working with, as I've said before, and it's still going to do the job.
Lachlan has just beautifully rolled the ball across the 6-yard box for me to tap in my next slide. So my issue here is actually, this is nothing to do with the technology, it's to do with the understanding of it, and I think it's partly to do with the name. And I actually think cloud needs a rebrand. And if we didn't call it cloud, we'd all be a lot happier. So I'd suggest that from now on we call it software production or something like that, because actually I think you'll find that the production team, the technical team, and everybody else will probably find it a lot easier. I think the marketing department will find it easier to sell it, and we'll all be much happier in our lot. So can I urge the industry, please, to stop using the cloud, and can we please use software production from now on? To finish the session, each one of you in turn, if there's anybody in the audience who's been confused by the myths of the cloud and they feel now they're a bit more confident, but what advice would you give them if they wanted to take on software production as an option for their company? Starting with Matt, and we'll finish with Mike.
I think for me the big thing is everyone's going to have questions and everybody's going to wonder how best you could do this. I think once somebody says to you what you can actually do with it, for example, if I said to you our editors can import and outpoint a crash and bring it straight into Premiere, and all of that is done through the cloud, I think you'll very quickly change your mind from questioning and worrying about that to saying how much easier that would be for everybody in that by the end point. I think that, as we have said here, is the education and the work to be able to make sure that that endpoint gets there. And I think we've all said that first we've got to get everything off-site, you've got to have a facility that can take what's coming off-site and then to be able to distribute it somewhere. That whole infrastructure's got to be there, and that's something you shouldn't take lightly. And as soon as you get that sort of spot on and right, everything else will just fall into place every way that you'd want it to.
Brilliant, thank you. Jonathan?
Yeah, I think it's for me it's about kind of being open about your business needs up front. Like traditionally we've come from a background, certainly for me, a technical background. We led everything with technical conversations about innovation, about tools. You need to enter the conversation about software production. I did it.
Well done.
With your mind open to the improvements to your business that could bring, and don't bring the technology blockers to the start of the conversation. You will need to explore those as you move through the conversation, and you might be able to you might not be able to make the concessions needed. But you might be, for 80% of your programming, maybe you could. And then that gives you the ability to then have a blended business model that allows you to recover some of the margin that's lost if you try and do everything in a traditional broadcast way. So I think that's go in with your eyes open and think about it as a business, not as a technology opportunity.
Brilliant, thank you. Lachlan?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's similar to how the Gen AI guys were talking. It's a tool in the end of the day. It's a tool that can be used for a specific purpose. There's plenty of resources out there online from all the different suppliers, Viz, AMP, GV, Simply Live with Readle. All of them out there have demonstrations, have all of that sort of side of things. So it's don't be afraid to look at these alternates to what you may be used to using in terms of hardware-based technology.
Take us home, Mike.
So I think, as everybody said, like it's a tool, right? But within that, and now that we've successfully rebranded, that it's software, actually it means that you're not tied to the cloud, whether that's on-prem, in your own data center, whether it's edge compute at a venue or in the cloud, it's software production. And any of those three tools can be used in the right use case that's needed for that. And I'd say just be brave. One of the things that we've done at Sky is we've not done loads of POCs and trying to prove that we can do this. We've actually gone, no, we're going to do that. We're going to, that right still, we are going to do that as software. And every time we do that, we learn and we experience a lot more and we refine. And, you know, we are, you know, light years away from where we were, you know, 3-4 years ago with how we were covering the netball to how we're doing the rugby. You know, it's really just embrace it.
Outstanding. Thank you. Matt, Jonathan, Lachlan, Mike, thank you. Please join me in thanking the panel for their time.